All right, everybody. Welcome to the final round of the 99th Annual Battle of Flowers Oratorical Contest. Again, I'm introducing myself. I'm Cameron Armstrong. It has been my pleasure to serve as this year's chairman and to work with a dedicated group of ladies to bring you these competitions. At this time, I will announce the names of the 5 finalists of the Oratorical Contest. Please stand at your seat, and when your name is called, please remain standing until the names are announced. All names are announced. In accordance with our contest rules, the afternoon speeches are presented in reverse order from the morning. I will call your names out in the order in which you will deliver your speeches. Arlen Kahn, Emmy Publico, Susie Brewer, Lebon Malone, and Stephanie Newberry. Congratulations, ladies. You may be seated. I would like to recognize the other 7 contestants who delivered their speeches beautifully this morning. We have learned a great deal today about chiseled in stone, iconic Texas architecture. You are commended for all of your research and your time that you have put into preparing for this contest. We had a large applicant pool, and we are so very happy that you guys chose to attend and participate today. It speaks highly about your character and the woman you're growing up to be. I feel sure that this contest will be stepping stones for your great, successful futures. As your name is called in alphabetical order, please come forward to receive your $250 check, a small gift from us for your participation in this competition. All right. Evangeline Bullock, come on up. Thank you. McKenna Koppel. Claire Hill. Megan Watson. Lauren Scott. Jane Ann Carroll. And Daniela Garcia. Let's give these accomplished young women a round of applause once again. We will give the finalists a minute or two to regroup. So please note the date of our 100th Oratorical Contest will be held Friday, February 21st. Please come back. We love having you here. Also, I would like to acknowledge the hardworking members of the Oratorical Committee, a group of heroines themselves. They've really worked hard. A lot of them have lost sleep over some fun questions that come up. Each one has contributed to making this day a huge success. Thank you to this amazing group of women. If y'all would stand, I'd love to thank you all. They're all out there working. We will now begin, as soon as they get here, they're walking over, with the final round with a new panel of distinguished judges who will be introduced at the conclusion of this round. As a reminder, contest rules dictate that each speech should be original, historically accurate, between 10 and 12 minutes in length, and delivered from memory with the intent to inform and educate our audience. There will be a short pause between each speech to provide the judges a little time to record their assessments. and they're not here yet, but judges, if you will please indicate when you're ready to proceed by raising their paddles. Between contestants, if we as the audience would please speak only in whispers, and we ask that you only enter and exit the room during those 3-minute pauses. So we'll wait just a little bit while we're waiting for our judges. All right, judges, just a reminder, if you will please indicate you are ready to proceed by raising the paddle. All right, Arlen, are you ready? Arlen Kahn, the title of her speech is Old Red, the Heart of Texas Medicine.
Which is the better city? The beautiful traffic flow of Houston or the crystal clear waters of Galveston? In 1881, the people of Texas were puzzled with the same question as they had a difficult decision to make: choosing the site of Texas's very first medical school. After debating back and forth between Houston and Galveston, the decision was finally settled, as an enthusiastic 70% of voters finally opted for Galveston. In a 2015 Texas Medical News Center article by Shea Connolly, she describes how Galveston at that time was an economic powerhouse of Texas due to having a bustling seaport town. As a result, the decision to place Texas's first medical school there was not only strategic, but laden with foresight, as the history of Texas medicine was forever changed. The Asheville Smith Building, built in 1890 and affectionately known as Old Red, became the first University of Texas Medical Branch, or UTMB, building and the heart of Texas medicine. Following the pathway of how this iconic Texas architecture was created, today, first we'll drop some blueprints by discussing the historical context surrounding Old Red and the background of its architect. Then, we'll lay down the foundations to understand Old Red's construction, as well as its most stunning features, before finally taking a step back to admire the handiwork and the impact Old Red has on Texas today. Just as how the heart pumps blood to every part of the body, giving it life, Old Red serves as a pulsating center of influence, giving life and influential medical advancements to every corner of medicine in Texas. The Texas State Historical Association, in its 1976 entry of Old Red, discusses how the Galveston doctors were already well prepared to become an influential medical center. Between 1865 and 1881, Galveston doctors were already organizing medical societies, treating patients in hospitals, teaching students in 2 medical colleges, as well as editing the state's only 3 medical journals. Additionally, the growing population of Galveston led to an increased need of physicians in the area. Heather Redmond, historian at the Sam Houston State University, explains that after the Civil War, Galveston's economic success, due to being one of the largest seaport towns in the U.S., was a huge drawing factor for newly freedmen who are looking for both economic opportunities as well as education. As a result, Galveston needed more physicians to meet the demands of its increased population, especially due to Galveston's long history of being more racially tolerant than other areas of the South, due to its history of trading with the Spanish and the French. Redmond explains that this allowed Galveston to have a long history of diverse populations and cultures, progressive thinkers, and early efforts at education. As soon as state funds were secured in 1881, architect Henry Clayton was hired to design the building. Henry Clayton was no stranger to the prolific buildings in Galveston, as he himself had designed over 225 buildings in Galveston alone. Despite designing many prolific buildings such as Bishop's Palace on Broadway or many of the established churches, medical historian Heather Wooten discusses how, according to Clayton, Old Red was his masterpiece. Henry Clayton was a high Victorian architect, which meant that many of his buildings featured decorative iron and brickwork, which emphasized shapes, textures, and colors. Old Red was no exception. Old Red, built in the Romanesque Revival style, gets its colorful nickname from materials it is built from, including red pressed brick, red Texas granite, and sandstone. These different materials allow Old Red to have unique alternating color patterns on its columns and windows, which allows it to command attention among the other buildings in the Galveston area. In addition to its unique coloring, Old Red also has many intricate details, such as the Star of Texas and the numbers 18 and 90, chiseled into two shields above the doorway to indicate the year that the building was built. On the interior, every single floor of Old Red had something unique to contribute to innovating medicine in Texas. On the ground floor was a pharmacological library. On the first floor, UT Medical Branch's first medical library. On the second floor, a bacteriology library, as well as 3 amphitheaters, one of which is still surviving, where medical students would have their classes and listen to lectures. And finally, on the 4th floor, an anatomical dissecting hall, which was conveniently placed due to the abundance of natural light due to Henry Clayton's design of his windows on the 4th floor. Historian Paula Summerly, in her 2022 video tour of Old Red, describes how the anatomical dissecting hall was conveniently located near a cadaver elevator. When dissection bodies were brought in via ship or rail, they would enter the hall through these cadaver elevators. On the other hand, living humans would have to take the very long cedar staircase inside the building. The cedar staircase is still in place today, with original wood paneling done by Clayton himself, as well as some of his architects. And Old Red also has on the interior, Old Red also has a legacy of teaching medical students. Since its first opening in October of 1891, Old Red has had 23 medical students and 13 faculty members. According to the Texas State Historical Association, by 1900, this number had grown, and there were 256 men graduate physicians and 6 women graduate physicians from Old Red. But this growth and success did not come without challenges, the first of which was when Old Red was about to turn into a new parking lot. According to historian Dr. Wooten, in the 1960s, many plans were drawn up to demolish Old Red and turn it into a parking lot in an attempt to capture more patients who wanted closer parking to the newer campus buildings and hospitals. Thankfully, Old Red had incredible support from its students, faculty, alumni, and community members that prevented Old Red from having this tragic fate. There were many campaigns, such as one where a red pressed brick, which was doubled as a paperweight, were sold with Old Red etched on it. Old Red enthusiasts could purchase this paperweight, and all proceeds would go towards saving the building from demolition. As Dr. Wooten describes, Old Red in the 1960s was the place where the majority of Texas physicians had graduated from, as there were only 2 medical schools in Texas at that point. So getting rid of Old Red was trying to take a part of their identity, a part of their heart. The second big challenge came after Hurricane Ike hit Galveston in 2008. According to the 2009 KHOW article, Hurricane Ike left most of Galveston and UTMB's buildings in total destruction, and Old Red was no exception. Old Red had experienced significant foundational damages due to the hurricane, but even before that, it suffered many structural issues, such as the roof leaking and poor ventilation, making it a bad choice for modern-day anatomy labs. As a result, the decision was made to transform Old Red from a classroom building that housed medical students into a museum that would soon house a legacy. Old Red's purpose today is primarily as a museum with many historical exhibits relating to medicine, as well as event spaces and meeting rooms. Old Red contains many sculptures of famous names in medicine, such as Dr. Joseph Lister, Madame Curie, and Hippocrates, all which line the McGovern Hall of Medical History at the entrance of Old Red. In addition, the original blueprint drawings as imagined by Clayton, as well as photographs of medical students studying in the 1900s in the Old Red building, are on display at the museum. The university has also dedicated over 2,000 historical, anatomical, and pathological samples to put inside the museum, some dating back to as early as the 19th century. Considered the birthplace of Texas medicine, Old Red and the UTMB system as a whole continue to serve the medical needs of Texans, but they also continue to distinguish themselves as leaders. From the very beginning, Old Red was known for many firsts. In 1891, it was the first medical school. In 1897, it had the first female graduate physician in Texas. And in 1953, the first African American physician in Texas. That's why it's so important that we learn about Old Red's legacy. As a medical institution, Old Red's importance is clear. It served as a reminder of all the medical advancements Texas has had. But arguably, as a museum, Old Red's importance is just as, if not more important, because it serves as an integral reminder of the medical and educational heritage of Texas, the challenges faced and overcome, and the legacy of thinkers and doers who made Texas medicine how we know it today. That's why today we first drawn up some blueprints to discuss Old Red's historical context as well as the background of its architect. Then we laid down the foundation by discussing Old Red's construction as well as the materials it is made from, before finally admiring the handiwork and the impact Old Red has on Texas. Old Red's significance is best summed up in a quote that I want to leave you with. Dr. Burke Evans, in his 1960s essay that he wrote to prevent Old Red from being demolished, wrote that history is not for us. It is for those who have yet to come.
Thank you, Arlen. Our second speaker is Emmy Pabloco, and the title of her speech is A Marriage of Equals, Tradition and Modernism in O'Neill Ford's Little Chapel in the Woods.
For years, the students at the Texas State College for Women had organized bake sales, waffle breakfasts, and rummage sales, all to fund the building of a new addition to the campus. Despite all their best efforts, the students could only cover half of the estimated building costs. Until one fine Sunday in 1938, Lewis Hubbard, president of the university, frantically rang for his secretary. A transaction needed to be recorded. From one Mr. Nicholson, a lump sum of the remaining $15,000 needed for the building of a little chapel in the woods. Built on the campus now known as Texas Women's University, the chapel stands apart from all other Texas architectural works. While everything is bigger in Texas and a bold spirit of pride have become well-loved parts of the state, there is also a profound beauty in the small things. The legacy of the little chapel in the woods is chiseled in stone through the lives and stories built into the chapel's walls and through the powerful marriage of tradition and modernism in its architecture. Today, I am going to illustrate this extraordinary chapel's modest beginnings, walk you through what this space looks like, share about the architect and his influence, and ultimately, how the little chapel in the woods embodies the love and passion of the people of the Lone Star State. Nearly a century ago, the United States was in the midst of an unprecedented period of hardship. Jobs were scarce and money even scarcer. Poverty, hunger, and homelessness were the norm. The country struggled to find a way forward, but to University President Hubbard, the way forward was clear, through the grounding nature of prayer and worship. Hubbard called upon the labor force of the National Youth Administration, a New Deal agency created by President Roosevelt, and found an architect to usher his dream chapel into reality. Enter O'Neill Ford. At face value, the choice for Ford as the lead architect for the chapel may have been a gamble. Here was a charming and at times brash young man early into his career, According to Texan architectural critic David Dillon, Ford was the hick from Pink Hill, a country bumpkin without a formal education in architecture. Hubbard needed someone experienced, someone who understood the economic restraints, someone who was a true professional. He had dreamt of this for far too long, to end up scrapping the project because he had placed his trust in the wrong person. Despite Hubbard's reservations, Ford's upbringing made him resourceful and set him apart from his peers. He was an unconventional choice, but the finished product proved he was worthy of the job. 90 feet long by 42 feet wide, the chapel stands before a sprawling stretch of trees, shrouded in greenery. Rectangular in stature, with a gable roof and a rose window above the entrance, the exterior makes a nod to modern design while also honoring the local character through the native fieldstone and brick. Beyond the doors is the vestibule, a small foyer with white walls lined with mosaic tile. To the left, a spiral staircase to the small upstairs balcony, opposite an amber stained glass window, honoring the workers, donors, and the dreamer of this sanctuary, President Hubbard. Following the vestibule is the nave, the space where the congregation sits. 5 wide brick arches support the wood beam ceiling, halting before the chancel where the clergy sits by the altar. But the chapel required more than just the skeleton of a building. It required personal touches to breathe life into the space. In other words, a chapel at the Texas State College for Women needed a chapel by women. Under the direction of Tony LaSalle, a member of the university's art department, the students made the space their own. The dedication of those 300 women who worked to adorn that space is evident, from the hand-painted ceiling beams down to the fibers of the hand-woven kneeling cushions. The little chapel in the woods is filled with sublime details, but the true masterworks of the space are the stained glass windows. As Louise Gossett from the Southwest Review explains, depicted on these panels is the unifying theme of woman ministering to the world. To the left are 4 windows, dedicated to women addressing the practical needs of society as scientist, nurse, social worker, and teacher. To the right, the aesthetic needs of society as speaker, writer and poet, musician and dancer. But the pinnacle of these works is a grand window above the altar, the biblical ideal of woman as the Madonna. Woven into the Madonna window is the motif of yucca. As art director LaSalle explains from Gossett's article, yuccas grow where the soil is dry. They grow and flourish in barren places, finding deep sustenance where none apparently exist. Their roots go deep against the downpull and the leveling force of wind. In spite of withering heat, they grow up toward the light. Yucca symbolizes women's strength, resilience, and how mothers create a strong foundation for future generations. For me, going to the chapel was an emotional experience. It reminded me of the strong women who came before me, women like my grandmother, who grew up with nothing, but always had enough to share. Women like my mother, who despite every hardship, never saw any reason not to lend a helping hand. It's because of women like them that places like the Little Chapel in the Woods exist. The success of many of the female art students is owed not only to the women in their lives, but to their experiences working on the chapel. Many of the female art students wrote their master's theses on their part in the chapel's construction, like Billy Colwell, carver of the wooden furnishings, and Beatrice Pascal, designer of the stained glass windows. Pascal would later earn the title of Arkansas Living Treasure for her work in stained glass, as featured in the Herald Leader. And, as her obituary details, Colwell followed in the architect's footsteps and dedicated her life to historical preservation. These women's livelihoods were built on the chapel's foundation, but they weren't the only women whose lives were tied to the Little Chapel in the Woods. On September 25th, 1939, Esther Webb married John Hausman, making her the first bride in the chapel's history, according to Texas Women's University's bridal records. It didn't matter that the chapel was still under construction. Being the first name in the chapel's bridal book was an honor. So I just know that the new Mrs. Hausman was the envy of all her friends. Since then, thousands of couples have followed in their footsteps, and hundreds continue to do so every year. Long before the chapel was even completed, it had gained national attention. On November 1st, 1939, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt dedicated the chapel. It only had one window installed, but Roosevelt could see what this space had the potential to become, saying, quote, "May the use of this chapel in the woods be a blessing to you all." For O'Neill Ford and his associates, the chapel was more than just a blessing. It was their first major foray into architecture. According to architectural reporter Patrick Sisson, following the chapel, Ford went on to design campuses like Trinity University, as well as the Tower of the Americas, earning him the title of the godfather of Texas architectural modern design. And for good reason. Ford is such a significant figure in architecture that in 1974, Ford was designated as a National Historic Landmark, a title largely reserved for buildings, like the Alamo or places like Texas Centennial Park. Following this honor, Ford was humored by its absurdity, joking that he could never change. Today, he is the only human being to be designated with this honor. Following his passing, the firm he co-founded, Ford, Powell, and Carson, has been active in the preservation, restoration, and construction of countless structures throughout Texas. But of all Ford's works, the Little Chapel in the Woods is his most iconic. O'Neill Ford once said, "The beauty of a brick is that you can hold it in the palm of your hand. You lay brick by hand so that when you're finished, you know how a wall is built because you can feel it. When you go to view the Little Chapel in the Woods, you can feel the love that it was built with, brick by brick. Women who, despite every challenge, created something that says, 'See me, and through me, the beauty of this little life.' When thinking of what is iconic, typically there is a gravitation towards the things that are grand in stature or historic landmarks, that these buildings are the natural successors to the title of iconic Texas architecture. And trust me, I know it's hard to let go of those standards. What about this Little Chapel in the Woods makes it iconic, and who am I to try and convince you that it is? I may not be a scholar of architecture, but I do know what it's like to be little. I'm 4'11". But more specifically, I know what it's like to be a little woman in a big world. But like me, the Little Chapel in the Woods is more than just its stature. It is an expression of the women's hearts and minds. This sentiment is revealed to us through the words written on one of the windows. It says, "Never mind the brick and mortar. Let us have the living minds to work upon." How rare is it to have a place where women aren't decorative statues, but instead both muse and artist? The building is unique, and that people can be a part of its history, not by passing a piece of legislation or fighting a battle, but by simply loving another person. The chapel is home to some of the most pivotal points in people's lives, the beginning of a life with their soulmate, or a farewell to a loved one. It is a place made of memories. With everything I know about this chapel, it is so hard not to love its humble origins, Ford's vision, every little detail of that little chapel, and by the power of God, the women and the fruits of their labor. Women who were witnessing the lowest period in the nation's history saw something else entirely: the love, compassion, and resilience of the women around them. Nearly all of the women who worked on that chapel have passed on from this life, but they're still with us, under the shade of those trees, sitting in the pews. Behind the glow of each window pane, traces of their souls can still be found. It may not rival the grandeur of other buildings, but don't let its size deceive you. The chapel is greater than the sum of its parts. Small and humble as it may be, the Little Chapel in the Woods has a heart the size of Texas. Thank you.
Okay, our third speaker is Susie Brewer, and the title of her speech is Texas Centennial Park, a chiseled example of America's golden age of architecture.
amphitheater, a whimsical garden filled with butterflies, and a statue named Rufus. These things, while they may seem like a random assortment, were all designed and originally created for the 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition at Fair Park in Dallas, Texas. Growing up, I went to Fair Park frequently. My childhood is full of chasing butterflies at the Texas Discovery Gardens, searching for sea monsters at the Lionheart Lagoon, and watching hit Broadway sensations at the Music Hall. Of course, I still visit each fall to enjoy a classic Fletcher's corn dog on the Midway at the annual State Fair of Texas. But Fair Park is more than just the sights and the fun things to do. It's a place where Texas history and culture is shown through the architecture. According to the Fair Park website, copywritten in 2024, Texas governor at the time, James Alfred, wanted to host a World's Fair to celebrate 100 years of the Texas Republic. Since everything is bigger and better in Texas, the governor even coined a new term, Texanic, to describe how mighty the state of Texas was and how grand he wanted this exposition to be, as recorded in Stephen R. Butler's 2022 book of the same name. So state officials turned to Texas architect George Dahl to design more than 50 buildings using a variety of Art Deco and Southwestern architectural techniques and technological advances to create this iconic Texas architecture. Today, we will explore the rich history and culture of Texas Centennial Park, starting with how Dahl showcased a wide range of cultures that influenced Texas through his designs, to how this 1936 expansion remade Fair Park as a modern fairground, and finally, how this expansion initially brought and continues to bring the entire community of Texas together through the diverse Texas culture that is chiseled in its stone. Using a variety of Art Deco and Southwestern architectural techniques, Dahl designed more than 50 buildings across 180 acres in less than a year to showcase the wide range of cultures that had influenced Texas throughout the previous 100 years. Patricia Bayer, in her 1992 book, Art Deco Architecture, refers to Art Deco architecture as cathedrals of the modern age, which use lively, unexpected combinations of design elements. Specifically, the Texas Centennial Exposition utilized retrospection, geometric ornaments, and decorative details. And Dahl had oversight through every aspect of this process, from the largest towering buildings to the smallest hot dog or peanut stands, as noted in the Dallas Morning News in June of 1936. Furthermore, there are notable nods to the 6 nations that once ruled Texas, through depictions on the lamppost in front of the Hall of State of a Spanish conquistador, a French explorer, a Mexican officer, a Confederate colonel, a frontiersman with a coonskin cap that looks a lot like Davy Crockett, and finally, a World War I American soldier, as recorded by Stephen Butler in 2022. Furthermore, there is also notably nods to these cultures through the Esplanade, which is a paved path in the middle of the fairgrounds surrounding a long stretch of water. On either side of the Esplanade, the Automobile Building and the Centennial Building host 3 large female statues each in front, hearkening back to the beginnings of Texas and connecting to today. Willis Winters, the director of Dallas Park and Recreation Department, in a 2016 KERA interview, refers to Fair Park as a place that, unlike other World's Fairs at the time, used steel and block to be a permanent exposition, another marker of Art Deco architecture. In fact, Fair Park in Dallas is the largest collection of true Art Deco architecture anywhere, as recorded by historian Karen Shopoff of America's Best History. These formational cultures can be found throughout the design of the Texas Centennial Exposition. The Texas Centennial Exposition is a place and a time that remade Fair Park to be the modern fairground that it is today.
While Fair Park opened to be a place for the State Fair in 1886, it was the Texas Centennial Exposition that remade Fair Park as a modern fairground and bringing around major reconstruction and modern updates. Bush and Parsons, in their 2012 book, Fair Park Deco, state that the state officials at the time wanted to commemorate 100 years of Texas independence by celebrating a World's Fair in this centennial year. The hope was that this would stimulate the economy in the midst of the Great Depression through large construction projects, encourage growth and development statewide, showcase Texas history and resources, and perhaps, most significantly, attract millions of tourists and their wallets. Several cities bid to host this World's Fair, but according to Bush and Parsons in the Art Deco Society of New York, copywritten in 2018, Dallas won the right to host by pledging nearly $10 million in bonds and the promise of incorporating many technological advances and many firsts. Willis Winters, again in his 2016 KERA interview, mentioned that visitors to the state fair could walk up to 7 miles through covered pathways in the buildings in air-conditioned comfort. This was a first for World's Fairs. Additionally, the Dallas Aquarium, which was part of this expansion, also brought visitors, as it was the first aquarium in Texas and the only aquarium in an inland city, as recorded by Paula Bossi in 2015. Saltwater was even transported for some of the sea life, something completely unheard of at the time. Through these technological advances, people came from across the state and the country to view the diverse cultures that helped form the Texas that we know and cherish today. According to the Texas State Historical Association, on opening day, June 6, 1936, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Daniel Roper, declared in his speech, "America, here is Texas." And Dallas became a national sensation almost overnight. Over 6 million people visited the Texas Centennial Exposition that year, and over 400,000 specifically came to visit the Hall of Negro Life, where the African American Museum of Dallas currently stands. According to the City of Dallas's Art and Culture website, updated in 2024, this exhibition was revolutionary as it exhibited the achievements of Black artists. This was the first time an exhibit of this type had ever been displayed at a World's Fair, so people came from across the globe to view the Texas Centennial Exposition. African American history is central to Texas culture, as Juneteenth, the date that this building was dedicated, was a celebration of slavery ending, which occurred in Galveston, Texas. The legacy of this exhibition still remains today, as in 1986, Fair Park in Dallas was deemed a National Historic Landmark and remains as the only intact and unaltered pre-1950s World's Fair site in the United States. According to Bush and Parsons' Art Deco Society of New York, 60% of the structures still stand. Perhaps this is the most complete collection of modernistic exposition art and architecture in the world. People came from across the state, the nation, and the globe to view the cultures that had impacted Texas through the Texas Centennial Exposition. The 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition is certainly an iconic piece of Texas architecture. George Dahl's designs brought national fame and recognition to Fair Park and the entire city of Dallas. The use of Art Deco architecture allowed the diverse cultures that had influenced Texas to be initially displayed at the exposition, and they remain on display today, more than 85 years later. The use of modern Art Deco techniques, ornamental designs, and technological advances helped this to be a unique piece of architecture in Texas and serve as a model that Art Deco architecture can withstand the test of time. Texanic is a word that fully encompasses what it means to live in this mighty state of Texas and certainly describes the impacts of the 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition. Willis Winters declared 1936 as the year that America discovered Dallas, and visitors to Fair Park still experience this same wonder today. So yes, Texas architect George Dahl was inspired by the rich and diverse culture of Texas to chisel history into the stones of Fair Park, to paint a picture of Texas independence for all to see, weaving through tales of resilience and Texas-sized strength through every inch, to create this iconic piece of architecture that has withstood the test of time.
Our fourth speaker is Labone Malone, and the title of her speech is 21 Stacks of Modular Architecture, Hilton Palacio del Rio, Chiseled in Stone. "1968, 30, 35, 202, and one last number, 2020. The year in which I left my home in South Africa for an opportunity to work and study in the US. When I arrived in San Antonio, I was told two things: support the Spurs and remember the Alamo. I did both, but along the way I have discovered amongst our sprawling, majestic city, there are many told and untold stories that make San Antonio unique, just like those numbers I just mentioned. 1968, San Antonio hosted the World's Fair. It had been 30 years since the last hotel was built in San Antonio, and when that new hotel was built, they stacked 35 rooms per day to complete it in a record-breaking 202 days. That's right. From the Missions to the Tower of the Americas to the most innovative high-rise buildings of their times. The architecture here has helped make San Antonio one of Texas' best-kept secrets. And no better an illustration of this lies in the physical structure and the story of the Hilton Palacio del Rio. To understand the significance of this hotel, which according to the Express News helped launch San Antonio's hospitality industry, it is important to go back in time and discuss the context in which this hotel was built. So today, we will explore the history of the Hilton Palacio del Rio, how a chess tournament put San Antonio's name on the international stage, and finally, how the hotel continues to thrive. Because San Antonio has always been known for the Alamo, but not Soviet-era politics. For many major cities throughout the US, the Great Depression and World War II had serious impacts on their economies, and for San Antonio, that was tourism. According to the San Antonio Conservation Society in 2017, in 1958, local government officials started working on an ambitious plan to host an international exposition, something that would put San Antonio on the map. And in 1962, the decision was made. San Antonio would host the 1968 World's Fair, the kind of event that would surely bring our city in the limelight. However, the 6-year construction plan was not without its problems. According to the Texas State Historical Association in March of 21, despite the organizers having full knowledge that the construction would displace hundreds of Mexican, German, and African American residents, the construction moved forward. The construction for Hemisphere and the hotels to house the tourists prevailed. This is where the story of the Hilton Palacio del Rio starts. According to the Texas State Historical Association in April of 2019, Henry Bartel Zachary, who was chairman and CEO of San Antonio's Hemisphere, took on the project of constructing a new hotel between the Riverwalk and Alamo Street. With less than 9 months remaining, a standard building process was not going to make their deadline.
Fortunately, the H.B. Zachary Company came up with a more effective technique, a modular construction technique. According to the San Antonio Uncovered in January of 2014, this building technique was the first of its kind in Texas, and it represents a milestone in the use of modular construction technique. These modular components could be stacked or positioned end to end to create a variety of layouts, allowing for builders to put the puzzle together on site. According to the previously mentioned article, the rooms were constructed 7 miles away, complete with furniture, carpeting, lamps, televisions, and even a Gideon Bible on the nightstand. The builder, H.B. Zachary, aimed to stack 10 rooms per day. However, they had gotten so skilled at operating the crane, they stacked 35 rooms per day. In the end, the project only took a record-breaking 202 working days to complete. The Hilton Palacio del Rio, a 21-story, 496-room hotel, opened 5 days ahead of schedule and welcomed its first visitors on April 1st, 1968. Okay, it's time for a fun fact. Did you guys know that Church's Fried Chicken is from San Antonio? And for my real San Antonians that already knew that, were you aware that in 1972, Bill Church of Church's Fried Chicken held the Church's Fried Chicken First International Chess Tournament at the Hilton Palacio del Rio? In an attempt to draw in recent world champion Bobby Fischer, Bill Church, an avid chess enthusiast, organized the chess tournament at the Hilton Palacio del Rio in San Antonio, Texas. Just take a moment to think about that. One of the strongest chess tournaments in world history was hosted in our very own city by a chicken millionaire. On November 19th, 1972, the world's top chess grandmasters gathered in San Antonio to engage in battle. The tournament featured 16 of the world's best chess players, including grandmasters Anatoly Karpov and Tigran Petrosyan of the Soviet Union and Sviatozar Gligorich of Yugoslavia. According to New York Times in 1972, Grandmaster Bobby Fischer, who took the title the previous summer against Boris Spassky and was the entire reason for Church's hosting the tournament, declined to play since the prize money of $4,000 was just too low. In 2020, Christopher Tulin with the Texas Chess Association stated that no American finished in the top half. Despite Fischer's recent dominance, it was clear that the US still had a long way to go. Furthermore, the hosting of representatives from an actively hostile country was controversial. With the Cold War in full effect, the Soviet Union violating human rights, and a rise of a massive worldwide movement to free Soviet Jews, the timing of the tournament was problematic. According to the American Jewish Historical Society in August of 2023, stated that 3 months before the tournament, the USSR introduced a ransom tax to be levied on immigrants, ultimately meant to deter Jews seeking to leave for Israel, the US, or other countries. With the tournament well underway, according to Alternative Press in 1972, a group of protesters from organizations across San Antonio gathered outside the Hilton Palacio del Rio. Thankfully, no violence came from the protest, but their voices were most definitely heard. Despite the controversy, the Hilton Palacio del Rio held one of the strongest chess tournaments to be held on American soil and served as a focal point for American-Soviet relations. Since the chess tournament, the Hilton Palacio del Rio has seen thousands of tourists and hosted hundreds of events. From our annual San Japan Comic-Con to the NCAA Final Four to weddings to every convention under the sun, the hotel has had a busy 5 decades since. Writing for the San Antonio Business Journal in 2011, Scott Bailey states that the Zachary Hospitality Corporation invested roughly $33 million to transform the hotel into a more contemporary hacienda-style hotel. Each room in the hotel features a balcony overlooking the Riverwalk or the city, keeping it competitive as a destination in a city still heavily reliant on tourism. According to the Texas Public Radio in December of 2012, the Hilton Palacio del Rio has light displays on their balconies. Over the course of more than 20 years, the lights have exhibited corporate logos, have spelt out "Go Spurs," and have been a festive delight. It is an emotional show that highlights the Hilton Palacio del Rio's distinct flair. As modular hotel architecture is becoming increasingly popular in the world today, with new hotels being heralded from San Francisco, New York, and beyond, the Hilton Palacio del Rio, built nearly 56 years ago, serves as an example so far ahead of its time that it will always deserve mention. While the Hemisphere did not draw the anticipated crowds at the time, the successful preparation that went into it paved the road for a far greater return on investment. The Hilton Palacio del Rio is a symbol of the infrastructure created, which helped turn San Antonio into one of the tourism and convention capitals of the US. If you would have asked me 4 years ago about who the Spurs were or facts on the Alamo, this girl would have looked back at you with great confusion. Now, I not only know about both of those, but through the Battle of Flowers Oratorical Contest mission to perpetuate appreciation of the history of Texas, I know of the history of the Hilton Palacio del Rio, the chess tournament that put San Antonio's name on the international stage, and the impact the hotel still has on our city. My hope is that the next time you pass by the Hilton Palacio del Rio, you will see it as I see it now, as a monument to San Antonio's culture and an icon to San Antonio's ingenuity. Thanks.
Thank you, Lebone. Our fifth speaker is Stephanie Newberry, and the title of her speech is El Paso High School, the Timeless Lady on the Hill.
We shape our buildings. Thereafter, they shape us. This quote by Winston Churchill embodies the legacy of El Paso High and is a testament to the impact architecture can have on a community. When we think of iconic architecture, our minds do not automatically gravitate towards a high school. Yet, El Paso High School has defied the norm. In 2017, according to the Architectural Digest, El Paso High School was named the most beautiful high school in Texas. Since the 1980s, it has also been listed in the National Register of Historic Places as reported by the National Archives. However, the building we see radiating today was not the original educational facility. Constructed to educate a growing population of El Pasoans, she has served her purpose for over a century, guiding the generations of students who walk her halls, all while remaining true to her original glory. Today, join me as we learn through the purpose and developments of the structure, explain the era she flourished in while influencing those around her, and discover how she has remained iconic through the decades, honorably claiming the name, the Lady on the Hill. In 1880, El Paso had no established public schoolings despite citizens' desire to incorporate them into the city. It was not until 1884 that El Paso High School's humble beginnings started on the corner of Myrtle and Campbell. At this location, a few classes were taught for a select group of elementary students until the high school began offering classes on the second floor in 1885. Although this was the start of educating the future generations of El Paso, teaching a few students in the extra space of a building was not ideal. In 1902, a second building was constructed 3 stories high, containing 12 rooms with an auditorium that could hold 300 students. For a moment, everything seemed ideal because the students now had a beautiful building to expand their studies. The superintendent, Mr. Putman, described the school in the History of El Paso High School to 1943 as a commanding position at the foot of the hill, where the air is absolutely pure and free from the noise of the business portion of the city. Unfortunately, this meant that the school was further away from students' homes. In fact, parents began calling to complain. But despite this inconvenience, by 1915, the school was enrolling 900 students. With this growth, there was no doubt that El Paso High School would have to evolve to better suit the students' and community's needs. Fortunately, this evolution was already underway. As early as 1912, the school board had begun to search for a new building, but when none ideal enough were found, they turned to an alternative. The school board placed the project in the hands of the firm Trost & Trost, with a budget of $500,000, equivalent to about $15 million today, and a slanted lot bounded by Cliff, High, Ange, and Virginia streets. During the 1900s, the Trost & Trost firm had created multiple buildings for the community for over 30 years, and their style captivated the growing neoclassical architecture that was becoming dominant at the time. By connecting the styles of the ancient Greeks and Romans, they created a new look that would transcend time. Henry C. Trost, the head architect of the firm, explored other high schools across the country, gaining insight into how El Paso High School could stand out amongst the rest. The community had also inadvertently impacted the direction in which El Paso's architecture would be enhanced. In 1893, the Chicago World Fair introduced the City Beautiful movement. In the article El Paso Matters, this movement emphasized the creation of beautiful architecture to reflect the beauty of the people residing in these cities. El Paso was embracing this movement within the community, and the school would soon follow on a vigorous path, bringing timeless beauty to many. Between 1913 and 1916, El Paso High School came to life at the foot of the Franklin Mountains, overlooking the city and its shared border with Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, thus gaining her nickname, the Lady on the Hill. There was no doubt of her ability to emit elegance with her marble flooring and 6 classical columns, with a Corinthian porch connecting the 2 wings, giving the building an L shape. Described in the article, The Home of the Tigers, the entrance of the school has a strong resemblance to the Pantheon of Greece. She also appears to be only 3 levels, hiding the ground floor below, making her a 4-story high school. She also has El Paso High School chiseled into the top of the stone of the building. Above her welcoming doors, she also shines a message quoting Mirabeau B. Lamar. It reads, "Cultivated mind is the genius of democracy. It is the only dictator that free men acknowledge and the only security that free men desire." Iconically molded in bronze, she urges her children to understand the importance of nourishing their studies every day. If anyone here has been a parent to teenagers, you understand how difficult that can be. One of the final touches of the school was the Jones Stadium, built in 1916, which attracted national attention as well, partly because of the dramatically sloped stadium and because El Paso High School was one of the first in the state to play football at night under stadium lights. Named after R. Randolph Jones, the first assistant principal, the stadium circles the field and can seat 12,000 people. It is also one of the first major stadiums to be built of concrete in the United States, and as recently as 2019 was still making headlines. According to KTSM, Jones Stadium finished as one of the top 2 competitors in a nationwide contest for America's best high school football stadiums. Today, the Lady on the Hill continues to overlook her student athletes, shining her lights proudly in the distance. On top of the architecture having phenomenal achievements, the Lady on the Hill collected scholastic accolades as well. El Paso High School's homepage explained that she was one of the first in the state to offer music courses and Spanish classes. In addition, the Lady on the Hill was the first to establish a student military corps in Texas, led by the superintendent, Captain Calvin W. Esterly. This opportunity tied students and parents to the growing Army base in El Paso, Fort Bliss. Being over a century old can add a mysterious lure to the architecture of El Paso High. And the Lady on the Hill is no exception to these timeless, hair-raising tales. Her chilling ghost stories follow her like a shadow, emerging when you dare to know more. Described in the novel The Spirits of the Border, the history and mystery of El Paso del Norte, these creepy stories date back to 1916, when a photograph of the school was taken. Faintly in the left corner stands a girl who was not present when the photograph was taken, but had appeared when the photo was reproduced. Another instance dates back to 1985, when the class photo was taken, and in a white nightgown appeared a girl with blurred facial features. The tale goes that she was not present that day, and that no one in the graduating class had recognized her. Today, the chilling photo sits in a trophy case to caution against other worldly secrets that dwell within El Paso High. If this was not spine-chilling enough, it is said that green mist could be seen from the fourth-floor wing in broad daylight, and that hauntings had become so common that the hallway was blocked off by bricks to ward off wandering souls. Only those who were present before the barrier was built have seen the hallway. The tunnels assisted those who were revolting against Porfirio Diaz and Victoriano Huerta in the 1910 Mexican Revolution. They also served the purpose of being a morgue in the Spanish outbreak of the 1918 Spanish flu and as bomb shelters during the Second World War. These tunnels were described as being very active at the beginning of the century by historian Ken Hundle. Despite her grandiose exterior, the Lady on the Hill continues to have secrets and roots lurking just out of sight. By the 21st century, decades of operation and tales had aged the Lady. Naturally, being over a century old, the Lady on the Hill was becoming worn down. For this reason, in December 2019, it was voted on by the El Paso Independent School District Board of Trustees to award $17.5 million to the School for Historic Preservation and Renovation. It was concluded that repairs were needed to the roof, facade, basement, main building stairs, and other areas that had become worn down and in some instances were obvious safety hazards. Naturally, being over a century old, she was becoming worn down, but with her community by her side, the road to recovery was not far off. By spring of 2022, KVIA had reported that the building renovation budget had finished at $19.4 million, with 10 out of the 17 projects completed. Upgrades included a new fine arts building, renovations to the main structure, a recording studio, and an art gallery, leaving the Lady on the Hill even more polished with a modern flair. Despite many changes throughout the years, El Paso High School has become a timeless icon for the citizens and students of El Paso. For decades, she has connected the city and its people to the foundations of learning and education. From the architecture inspired by the ancient Greeks and Romans to the groundbreaking curriculum at the forefront of education, El Paso High School has distinguished herself as a true lady of learning. It has been said that a woman is a full circle. Within her is the power to create, nurture, and transform. The creation of El Paso High School, the timeless Lady on the Hill, has nurtured and transformed a wealth of students for over the century, never changing her purpose. With her head held high and her crown freshly polished, she will continue to do so for many years to come. Thank you.
This concludes our final round. At this time, I would like to introduce our afternoon judges. They were chosen for their knowledge of judging interscholastic forensic competitions and for their knowledge of the roles of architecture in the establishment and growth of Texas. We sincerely appreciate the time they have given and their expertise as well. Please stand to be recognized as I call your name. Audience members, please hold your applause until all 5 judges have been called. With a wealth of experience in judging, coaching, and interscholastic competitions on the state and national level, serving as our forensic judges are Jana Riggins and Michelle Watkins. Serving as our topic judges today are Charles John and Elizabeth Brumette. Thank you. Our fifth judge serving in the capacity of past president of the Battle of Flowers is Lynn Ziegler. Judges, thank you so very much for your service today. Catherine, Francie, and Christy will take you down to the deliberation room. While they are moving on, we would like to thank the Witty team for working to hold this wonderful historical contest in such a wonderfully historic location. Thank you. I am also, so while the judges go deliberate, we are so honored to have a wonderfully special guest to come speak to us. Her name is Major Louisa Kobrick, and she is U.S. Army. Next assignment, get this, is a history professor at West Point. Today, she will be giving us a brief overview of the historic quadrangle at Fort Sam Houston. Join me in warmly welcome Louisa.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here today, and I want to start by thanking the Battle of Flowers Association for inviting me. It's really an honor and privilege to see the hard work you've put into the community and the state and our future generations. And also, I just want to say a big thank you to the wonderful speakers we had and the audience for supporting them. It's truly a tremendous job so far to all of you. So as she said, I'm Major Louisa Kobrick, and I was just asked to speak a little bit on the theme today, thinking about Fort Sam Houston and some of the iconic architecture we have there. And really, there's a lot. If you haven't been at all, I encourage you, if you get nothing else out of this, know that you're allowed to go visit. Don't be intimidated by the fact that it's an active military installation, right? You can come get a visitor's pass and come see it for yourself. And it's well worth it. So just for the interest of time, I'll focus on one small piece, the historic quadrangle, which is really where it all began. And we can kind of tease out a little bit of the story there. So before I get into it, I just would like to say, I think we've seen from the various speakers we've had so far, there's a lot of ways you could talk about architecture, right? That there's the feats of engineering and technological advances, there's the beauty and the art. And as a historian, I'm always drawn to the human story and the ways we interact with it. So that's what I'll try to tease out as we talk about the quadrangle. And in particular, as our last speaker pointed out, right, that once you build something, right, that function you're intending really influences the form. But once it's out there, that form really starts to exert an influence on us and changes the future functions. And we can really see that through the quadrangle. So to start, we go back to about 1845. And that is when we really have the first U.S. Army presence here in San Antonio. This is a fantastic location for the Army because it's really a crossroads to the frontier. A great location because there's access to water, and the frontier at that time is really focused on interactions with Mexico as well as hostile interactions with Native Americans. All right, so that's the primary function for the Army in this region. And San Antonio is well positioned geographically as well as by the number of roads in and out. So this really becomes a logistics hub for all of those forward actions. And for those of you who don't have to think about these things, that's great, but logistics is really where our wars are won and lost. So this is an incredibly important site. Now at the time, the U.S. Army's presence was actually leased, right? The Army is leasing different buildings in San Antonio, which is incredibly expensive. And this includes the site at the Alamo, which was a warehouse depot, but other buildings that they're leasing. There's a series of a couple of floods, and of course, standing water brings disease, right? It's less than ideal conditions. So as we move forward through time, post-Civil War, the Army is considering where are they going to start closing installations and where are they going to position themselves. And they're considering leaving San Antonio. It's expensive to lease. They're going to look for some place where they can create a permanent structure. Well, while it's not always great having rabble-rousing soldiers around, it does do some good things for the local economy. So San Antonio starts negotiating, and they eventually offer up about 100 acres for the government to own and build on. And it's a pretty good, I don't know, I look around and this all looks flat to me, but the current location of Fort Sam Houston is on a hill. So this is great terrain where you're not going to get flooded and have standing diseases and so on. So it's a good location. And to sweeten the deal, they are given access to a quarry for stone where the present day zoo is. So great building materials, good location. And the final kind of nail in the coffin was that the railroad committed to coming through San Antonio. So again, cementing that this is going to be a great transportation hub. So the Army decides to stay. And again, they're going to focus on being a logistics depot. So the historic quadrangle, which is the first of these set of historic buildings to go up, is a warehouse. It's logistics storage. And so I'm referring to it as a quadrangle. So for those of you who haven't seen it, it's purely a square of stone walls with a hollow courtyard in the center and a watchtower that began life as a water tower. But the idea of the watchtower then is that it's got the water supply as well as the ability to look out over all angles of the quadrangle, really to protect against theft. That's the primary purpose. So this is a pretty central hub, and the quartermaster general, General Meigs, is put in charge of the construction. Now, of course, he's got access to the stone, but on top of that, he's also thinking about, as I've said, logistics is super important to winning wars, and this is the spot. So he really wants something to commemorate just how significant this location is. So that's why he's got these really grandiose designs. So for those of you who've seen it, it really does. It looks quite nice for what's a warehouse, right? I mean, but so that's why he wanted something stately and commensurate with the function of this place. As they're going through construction, there were those who raised concerns about the expense and is this really the best way to go about this? They proposed, an iron water tower in the center rather than the stone. But Meigs wins the day. And one of my favorite quotes came out of this where they finally decided, which plan to move forward with. So they said, quote, "It was understood to be an accurate copy of a similar work existing somewhere in Europe." So there you have it. A great work of art, the water tower in the center of the quadrangle. So now that said, that water tower capacity was pretty small. I think it was about 6,700 gallons of water. So within less than a decade of its construction, the water tower function ceases to be useful. They've already outgrown that capacity. They do build a series of other water towers that are temporary structures, getting up to 300,000 gallons between those three different water towers, just to give you a sense of how quickly they outgrew that capacity. But that said, the quadrangle itself, which is not a large building by present standards, right? This would be the central hub of logistics for the nation for a while. And that just gives you a little bit of sense of, the size and scope of the Army in that moment, right? Very much influenced by the founding fathers who were afraid of a standing army, right? We were a very small element. And that would have been sufficient for the warehouse storage at the time. Okay, so they stopped being a water tower. They did go ahead and add clock towers, or clocks to the tower on two faces. So those clocks would have been functional because some of those warehouse spaces were converted into offices. So that's for the few office spaces. By 1921, it is no longer a warehouse at all. It is entirely office spaces. Partly because they've outgrown the capacity of this quadrangle, but also because it's too grand to be a warehouse. General Sherman at the time is, not in 1921, but as he's considering how to downsize the Army, he's looking at the fact that hostilities with the natives are declining. He's going to start closing down some outposts in the West. Where is he going to keep? And he looks at Fort Sam Houston, and these stone structures are pretty permanent. So it doesn't make sense to tear those down. So here's an example of where the architecture saves the function, right? But on top of that, he's looking and he's like, this makes no sense as a warehouse. It will never, he said, it'll never be fit to be a warehouse again. So it becomes primarily office spaces moving forward. Now, I'll fast forward a little bit through time because, moving forward, there's San Antonio, or Fort Sam Houston, continues to be central to a lot of the activities, all of the major conflicts in our U.S. history here. It's a huge site of mobilization and demobilization for World Wars I and II, as well as the conflicts that follow. And there is more to it than just the historic quadrangle and its impacts, right? There's the home of Army medicine there, and so a few other things we have to give credit to, but we go back to this historic quadrangle for getting it all started. And so I'm going to skip ahead here to 1975, which is when the quadrangle and about 500 acres of Fort Sam Houston were placed on the historic register. And then from there, looking at the present day, it is, like I said, the home to 5th Army, or U.S. Army North. Our mission, right, is we are the Army Service Component Command. So we support U.S. Northern Command in Colorado. That's where they're headquartered. Our primary focus is homeland defense. But the building itself, the quadrangle, is the office space, the headquarters of this command. And when I first showed up here a year ago, I had no idea what I was going to be walking into. I had one of the office spaces there in the quadrangle, and I look around, and there's deer and peacocks and everything. And I like to tell everyone I work in the best zoo in the Army. But this is the space that we are still in. It's gorgeous office spaces, and we don't all fit. We are spread out across many buildings. And for a headquarters element for planning, right, that's a little less than ideal. Part of your planning requires going by and seeing the other offices that you don't necessarily interact with a lot, so you can start, synthesizing ideas. And that's just not super feasible. My own section, right, the people that are part of the team I work with are spread across 3 buildings. And we're not big. We're about 20 people. So the fact that, we're all spread out really is a reflection of the fact that we're keeping this historic quadrangle as offices, even though it's not functional, right? But again, it's the ways that these forms continue to influence us in our present day lives, all because of these origins. Going back to, the 1860s. So anyway, as I draw this to a close, I would like to, encourage you to think about the ways that you interact with this iconic architecture, and then think about how is this iconic architecture interacting with you. And I encourage you to please come on out and take a moment, to reach out and touch a little bit of this history that is key to American, Texan, and Army history right here in San Antonio. So thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to start with 5th place, and when you win, come step on up. Actually, I'm missing a page. Oh, well, we'll wing it. Our president, Betsy Zachary, and our university liaison, Lisa Ray, will have your certificate and your check for 5th through 2nd place. Our 5th place winner is Stephanie Newberry with Abilene Christian College. Our 4th place winner is Arlen Kahn of UT Dallas. Congratulations. Our 3rd place winner is Susie Brewer with Texas Christian University. Okay, our 2nd place winner is LeBonnet Maloney. Congratulations. All right, Little Chapel, you ready for this? And our first place winner of $5,000 is Emmy. I can't even tell you how amazing all these ladies are.
I guess that means nice things come in small packages.
They do come in small packages, and they're all women. All right. In addition to the personal prizes, our top 3 winners have won, the universities have won, respective, let me start over. In addition to their personal prize, our top 3 winners have won cash awards for the respective advisors universities department. These awards will be mailed next week. So for $2,500, we'll go to Abilene Christian. Thank you so much. $1,500 will go to Incarnate Word. And Texas Christian, you've got $1,000 coming your way. Thank you so much. And I can't tell you guys how happy and honored I am to have been given this position to work with all of you. This concludes the 99th Annual Battle of Flowers Oratorical Contest. We appreciate your attendance today, and we hope you've enjoyed our program of outstanding contestants and speeches of iconic Texas architecture. Mark your calendars, ladies. Next year, and men, is 100 years, and we will meet on February 21st, 2025. Thank you.
Actually, if you'll give us just 1 second, we want to thank Cameron Armstrong here for all her hard work that she's done putting this together, and we're going to be giving her this lovely arrangement of flowers. So thank you for a wonderful contest.
Thank you so much. Thank you.